Alright, here we have our wonderful website. But the problem is, if you look at the website that we designed in the previous video, you will see that this looks terrible. And how do we make it not terrible? Well, we do it with something called CSS. And CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, which basically applies styles to the website, which makes it look good, I guess. But before we get started on that, I added a bit to the HTML. I didn't go over this exactly in the previous video because it was basically repeating stuff, but here are a few things to mention. So head for the table, you have a tag that's called thead, and then there is th for the table head row, I guess, I don't know. You have that, and I just added a few things about like how many people, like how many servings, and how much you need to have. I have no idea how cooking works, but this is just like random placeholder text, and you can do whatever you want. And then these are basically the same thing, just the h2 tag, which is a header, and then p tag, which is a paragraph, which is a small text. And I have this thing where it's like the tm thing. It's above the text, and you do it with sub, and that apparently stands for superscript. So that places the thing above that. Or you have italics, which use the em tag, which stands for emphasis. And why is it emphasis and not italics? Is because I believe that tags are supposed to show the meaning that they're supposed to express, not what they actually do. For example, emphasis is shown by italics, not italics, just it's an italics. But same as bold. If you want to make something bold, that would be strong tag instead of the bold tag. Alright, so now let's just create a new file, Control N or Command N, and just save it. And we can name it anything we want, just style.css, let's just do that. You can name it anything.css. And let's just go back to the HTML. How do we tell the browser that the CSS file exists? We use something called a links tag, which is placed here on top of in the head tag, and we do link, and it automatically completes it for you. Rel, it's called style sheet, and this href is basically the path to the thing. It gives you some placeholder. That's not where it is. It's just style.css because we're creating in the same folder. And now we have created our CSS file. Alright, so a very important part you need to know about CSS is that it's cascading, which is part of the name. So like, for example, if you want to make stuff that's make all of the text, I don't know, blue, you don't just like select this, all of the part, like the first part, okay, let's make that blue, let's make this blue also. You can just select the entire thing, and whatever is contained in it basically cascades down, and all of the things that are contained in it are colored blue. So, and this is how selectors work. So if you want to make everything the blue color, we select body, but just typing this. So for example, body, and then how do we make the color blue? You just type color, colon or semicolon, yeah, it's called a colon, and then just type the color blue, and then with a semicolon to end it. So if we save that, now everything is blue. But let's just not do that because that looks horrible. Let's just say we want H1, right? So the big headers. And we also want to select, so the only big header is the pepperoni pizza. We want that color, as you see in the design, to be green. Alright, now you can see that it only selects the header first, header 1 tag. And this is only because there's only one H1 tag. If we duplicate this twice, and there's two H1 tags, it selects both of them. So it's selected by tags. And so basically CSS, the first part is called the selector. Some other stuff, let's just work on the nav bar first. So how do we select the nav bar? We select nav, right? Because we put everything in a tag called nav. So we just type the word nav, and then with these like brackets, we put whatever we want the size to be in it. So for example, we maybe want the font size to be bigger, right? So let's just say font size, which you see it nicely completes it for you. And now how do we define the size? Like, what is the measurement or the unit? Is it like centimeters or something? No, it's actually pixels first of all. So pixels, for example, 14 pixels. This is basically the font size that you see in most text editors or something. Pixels are basically the amount of pixels on your screen that you're viewing in. Or maybe, so let's say, I don't know, 20 pixels, that's good. Another type of unit is called percentages. And let's say 20% basically makes it 20% the size that it normally was. And right, so let's say that we want the color, maybe the header, let's see, I don't know, the header, we can make the background color. So that's how you do background color, you just type background dash color. And maybe let's just say, black, right? So that, okay, so just to demonstrate, that's what it does. But, that looks terrible, so we're not going to do that. we're just not going to do a background color, but we can do a border color. So we said border bottom, right? So we can only do the bottom border that has a border. And now what we need to do is 1 pix. So that's how wide the border is, the width of the border. And the solid, so you can have like dashed or solid or dotted or something solid. And so we can say flat. All right, it's a semicolon to end that. And now you can see we have this like divider thing. And you can see that how like on the sides like, it doesn't completely reach the edges. There's still a bit of a gap here. And that's because the body, so if we select the body, it has some, and also we can select the HTML. So how do we select both of them? We separate it with a comma. And now whatever we type inside applies to both of them. And we need the margin to be 0. And then we can just type 0 without a unit. And you can see that works perfectly. And so basically what the margin is the amount of like stuff between it. By default, it gives a tiny bit of like space between the sides, so like it doesn't touch the thing entirely, but this is what we want. But now the problem is that if you see the top part, it is not, the home is touching the edge of the screen, and that doesn't look very good. So what we can use is called padding. And padding we can say also using units, for example 20 pixels, and that will give it a lot of padding. And let's say we want to have 10 padding. So the difference between margin and padding is that margin is what is outside of it, and padding is what is inside. So if you do margin 10 pixels, for example, it also separates the divider because now it's just placing space on the outside, not the inside of it. And we can do the same thing here. So like, let's say A tags, right? A tags are the links on top. A tags, we want them to be, maybe we don't want the underline. So we do text decoration, actually, that's what it's called, text decoration none. And now it removes that. Color, maybe we want the color to not be blue and just be the normal color, black. Alright, that button, maybe we want the width, so we can manually change the width to be 20 pixels, and that's way too small. So we can do, I don't know, 100 pixels. Great. Height, we might want to make it higher. So height, 40 pixels. Well, maybe too much. Let's say 20 pixels. That's the same as before. 24 pixels. I'm just going to do random values. 30, right? Let's do that. And border radius is how round something is. Border radius. So this is pretty simple. You can also use pix for this. So let's say 5 pix. That kind of gives a rounded thing. And you can see the styles, the default styles keep like changing, and it looks really ugly. So we can do background color, right? We want to make it the green color, and we're just going to do that for now. And color white. Oh, right. We need the semicolon here. Right, now it looks like that. Great, maybe we want the font size, and then we want that to be bigger, like the other things. Font size 20 pixels. Maybe that's too big, let's say 15. And as we said in the design, we want it to be on the left side. So what we do is we can use the float thing. Right side. Yeah, float right. And now you can see that it magically goes to the right. Yeah, puts it on the right. And you can see that there's a weird border. We want to get rid of the border, so we can just type border none to get rid of the border. And now we have a nice button here. Right, and then we can do the same thing with the other stuff. And remember, we have this div here which contains all of the rest of the website. How do we only select that div? Because we might have multiple divs, and that's how we can have IDs. ID is basically giving a name. So ID, I don't know, main, let's just call it main container. There can be no spaces between it, and yeah, main container. And then there can be classes, for example class, maybe we can call it container. And classes, and the difference between IDs and classes is that ID is a name for one thing, and classes you can put on multiple different things. So, and then all of them will have that class. But let's say just ID, and ID you can select it with a hashtag. So with tags you just type the name, but with IDs you have to do this. So let's say main-container. Main container, what do we want to do? We want the margin, maybe add a bit of margin, yeah. Margin, I don't know, 50 pixels. Let's say you do that. And then now if you save it, you can see that here is the main container, and then you see the orange. Some orange is a margin which you put it on the outside, and now it has that. But maybe how do you want to put it in the middle? And so we can maybe shrink the width a bit, 1200 pixels. So now the width is only that much. It's a bit too big, I think. 1200 pixels, let's say 600. And now if we save that, you'll see that it goes to there and it doesn't put all of it. So we want to center it in the middle, and we can actually do auto. And a lot of properties have this auto thing where basically the browser just calculates where it's supposed to be put. And now if we do this, you can see that it's in the middle now. Maybe the next thing you might notice is that text is a bit ugly, I would say. you can just go to the top and as styles cascade. As I said, like it will font, right? Font family is the correct thing. Font family sans serif, which is a font for the name for the fonts that don't have like the weird things on the middle. And now we can see that it looks slightly better, but it still looks bad because the default font is Arial, I believe, or Helvetica, depending on the browser. And what you can do is you can actually go to fonts.google.com, and it's not font.google.com, it's fonts. A good sans serif font would be Roboto, and you can just click on that, and then you can see that it has all kinds of different fonts. So I don't know, let's just select, let's see which ones we need. Or do we just select all of them maybe? I mean, you probably shouldn't, you can just select all the fonts you need, which is different like weights and sizes, but I'm just gonna select all of them for now, and if you click here, you can see all of the fonts you have. And you can just like choose to import them in style, so you can just literally copy and paste whatever you have here, and then you just put it there. And it's basically a URL, and you can just import a font from the URL with the @import the URL. Here it says to do this: font family Roboto sans serif. That's just what we're gonna use, and you can separate it with a comma. And what does a comma mean? It's not that it's both sans serif and Roboto. It's just that it tries to find Roboto first, and if that doesn't exist, then sans serif is like the backup. And now if you see that the font changed a bit, it's hard to notice, but it changed. And maybe it looks weird. A good thing we can define is called the line height. So we can have 1.5, which basically increases the spacing between the words. And generally, if you think your text looks weird, just by increasing the spacing, it often makes it look better. Now we can go to the more advanced part of CSS, which is that you can have different multiple selectors. For example, you can like put them on top of each other. So here we have just selected A, which happens only to be on the navbar. But let's say if you have a tag somewhere else and we don't want it to be the same like I don't know styles, and we only want the links on the navbar to be like this, we can actually just type nav before it and type A, and you'll see nothing has changed because that's only here. But now if we want to put another A somewhere here, a tag href something.com 1 2 3 4, just as a placeholder, you can see that this doesn't get affected by the styling. And if you go back to here, and if you remove that, and if you save it, if you save that, you'll see that it just changes to that. So if you don't want to affect something else, you can just save it like this, and it won't affect it. And same thing with the button. Maybe we only want the button on the navbar to look like this, and that's what it would do. And maybe we think the about and home and about are spaced too close together, and we just want to space everything apart more, and we just want to like space everything in the navbar more apart. And what we can do is call nav and select everything. So what we can do is actually use the asterisk, which selects like every single thing. And so nav asterisk, and then we can do margin, I don't know, 15 pixels. And now it spaces it out a lot better. And you can see that it also gives the margin at top and bottom a lot, so it just makes the button a bit weird. And the way you can do that is actually you can do margin 15 pixels 0, 0 15 pixels. So if you have two numbers, that would define like the horizontal and the vertical. So vertical is no margin and the horizontal is that much, and now it's spaced out a bit more. Okay, and now we're going to go over the colors. And the part about colors is that it doesn't look that great to just use the default like green and blue. Maybe you think it's too saturated or something like that. And what we can do is that instead of just typing green, we can have also RGB values. And if you don't know about RGB, it's basically just red, green, and blue mixed together. You probably heard of it. So it's red first and then green. I'm just gonna type some random colors. 200. Let's see, green is the middle one, and then blue, let's say 20. How does that look? Okay, that's not good. Yeah, like you can just use a color picker to pick a color you like, or just do something and pick a random color. I would say that would do for now. That green looks meh. Okay, enough. Yeah, so you can have RGB values. Another thing we can have is hex value. So with these like hashtag, not hashtag, just like the number sign or whatever you call it. But so basically these hexadecimal values, which I don't know, and I'm just gonna type some random letters. It's gonna look terrible, but you can see that it's a weird purple color. But basically these are different colors, and RGB is essentially out of 255, and the colors are basically brightness values, and you can just change it to whatever you want. So you can just copy and paste this to the button, so we should have like consistent colors for these. And that's how you can define these like your own colors. And also we can have the border, maybe we don't want it to be a solid black, we want it to be a bit of gray, and now that makes it a grayer. And we can also use RGB, I don't know, let's say 180 this time, and that will give you a nice and light gray, and that's great. And that is how colors work. And the next thing is we can change the width of something. So let's say the image maybe is too small. So IMG, select that on the bottom, I don't know, place it wherever you want. Width, you can see if you do 20 pixels, that shrinks it to being tiny. And if you do 1,000, that's like huge. And so how do we know like how the exact size of the container? We know that the width is 600 pixels, so we can just like copy that and just do this. But a better solution is not to just copy that. So like in case if you want to change the width of the main container, how do we just make it fill? You can actually do 100%. And you can see that if you now like change it to 400 and 200, it scales like perfectly. Percentages are basically the percent of the container in some cases, and in case of the font size, it's just like the percentage of the size. Let's say 50%, it will always be half the size of the container, and if you do 10%, that would be always a tenth. So yeah, percents are pretty logical. And you can see that the width, the height, normally for images, you shouldn't set the height because that would just make it be squished or something, and the browser just automatically changes the height based on the width to make it like the correct aspect ratio. Okay, so another thing that we're going to do is the position. So you can see that now if you scroll on it, the header doesn't stay on the top. Maybe you want to make it seem like those websites where you scroll, the header stays on the top. And what we can do here is called nav, and we can actually change the position. And you can see that there's a lot of them positions: absolute, fixed, relative, sticky, and we can just do fixed. Fixed basically stays in the same place no matter where you scroll. And now you can see that if you scroll the same, it stays in the same place. But for whatever reason, it basically messes up like all of the styling, and why is it on the side now? The thing is like this. So we can actually have position. Like now if you use fixed, you have two more things called top, and you can use left. So basically that you can position it wherever you want, and now we can just position it on the top like that. And you can, like if you change this to 100 pixels, it just moves it down a bit, and you can just like position it wherever you want on the page. And now it's like kind of small, so you actually have to do with 100% now to make it span the entire area essentially. And now you can see that it works pretty nicely. And now the weird thing you can see is that the text on the header is actually half inside the navbar when you scroll. And the reason for that is that it is not on top of this anything. And also the background color, we haven't did it, and it looks white, but it's actually transparent essentially. So we can just add one thing like that. Now you can see it works pretty well. And the thing is that now the pepperoni thing is like on top. And the reason for that is that once you have position fixed, it basically doesn't think that there's a thing on the top anymore. It just kind of makes it disappear and place it on top of stuff. So now it's a pepperoni the thing, we have to move everything down a bit. And how do we do that? We can just, so for example, margin. We already defined the margin, but we can also do margin top. Let's say 100 pixels, and now it just moves it down by that much. So, and basically, yeah, it just gives a huge margin on the top where it basically does stuff. And that's it. And now finally, the last thing we're going to go over is something called pseudo classes. So pseudo classes is something that I can never spell, but basically, let's say for example, we want to have something that's like maybe the button change effect, so you know that you can click on it, because now if you click on it, it shows you nothing to symbolize that it's being clicked. So for example, we can do button, and then we have colon on the selector, hover, and you can see now maybe we want the background color to be, I don't know, darker. So 100, 180 maybe. I'm just also gonna invent some random color, and you can see that now if you hover on it, it changes color, and that's really good. You can apply this hover thing to all different classes. But maybe we don't want to just change the button's color when we hover on the div button. You can actually also put it here on the nav, and what will happen now is that you can see that if you just hover on the top header, it kind of just does the same thing. So I would say that's pretty cool. So you can use the hover classes to do a lot of pretty cool stuff, but I'm just gonna put it on here. And another thing is called active, so you can also use active. And what active does is that now if you click on it, it also changes color. So if you just hover over it, it changes color, and click on it, it changes color. But the thing is, like, maybe you don't want it to just like change color suddenly. You want a slight transition, and this is what you can do. You can just type the transition, and keep in mind, type it in like the main selection. Don't put it in the cover, and just transition. You can type the word background color, which is a property of this transition, and then space 0.2 seconds. And 0.2 seconds seems pretty short, but actually it kind of takes a bit of time to animate. You can see that it's actually pretty long. It just seems pretty short, but I would say for most of my websites I do 0.15 seconds, and that seems like a good amount of time. Now another part of like the pseudo stuff is that not pseudo classes, they're called pseudo elements. So for example, if you want to have A, right, and this is like very advanced parts of CSS, and you don't really need to like understand it, and there are sometimes you want to use it. And on here you can have an additional property called content. Content here we're just gonna have like two quotes with nothing in it to have nothing. Let's say maybe, I don't know, display. There's another part, display. So there are two different types of things where I went over in the HTML episode. So basically there are inline elements and there are block elements. So inline are like text, for example, these are all in a line and like together. And block elements are these like called like something like images, which is a block, or the div that's contained in the website, that is also a block. So display, we're going to force it to be a block, so we can change the display differences. So A before all of the things, there elements, there will be a block here, and it turns out that's what it does. And we can make the background color black, and just to show it to you. And it has nothing because it has no width. So let's say make the width, I don't know, 20 pixels. Height can also be 20 pixels. And now if you do that, you can see that there's two squares on here. And you can also just position it somewhere and change it differently. And these are sometimes helpful, I would say, because like you don't need to put an element there in the HTML, you just insert a class. So let's just example, we can actually put a hover and then like this, change them together there. Now if you, yeah, that's really weird, but basically what it's doing is that if you hover over something, it just inserts that element and it just like jumps around really weirdly. But the point is, you can do that. Sometimes it's helpful. After you finish watching all of what I've shown for the tutorial, you might think, well, that still looks pretty bad. But that's just because I haven't actually given all the values. Just in the tutorial, I can't remember it and just tweak them fast enough to make them look good. But after you just change the values a bit and change it to a better color, which I'm sure you know how to do by now, you can just make something that looks much better. For example, I changed the font of these headers and there's some other stuff. I'm not going to show you how this was done in the video, so I'm going to assign this as, I don't know, homework, but just try to replicate this. And also just keep in mind that Googling is not a bad thing. I would actually encourage you to do it because programming, like, there's no way you can remember, like, for example, all of the CSS attributes or all of the HTML tags. I would say, yeah, I'm actually going to encourage you to Google because I added this nice shadow thing on the navbar or the header, and you will have to Google to see how that works. And also subscribe for the next video, because in the next video I will just show you the answer to how I basically tweak the CSS and make this like that. Alright, thank you for watching. See you.